It's Wednesday, July 5th, 6 o'clock p.m., and this is a meeting of the Plan Commission of the City of West Bend. More than 24 hours in advance of this meeting, notice of the time, place, date, and subject matter of the meeting was posted in accordance with Wisconsin state statute. We recognize a quorum of our Plan Commission here tonight with Scott Schneiberg and Chris Schmidt excused absent. I invite you to please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our first item of business tonight is approval of our minutes from the Plan Commission regular meeting held on June 6, 2023. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you, Justice. Second, Mike. Any comments, corrections? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Our second item of business tonight is a conditional use permit request to allow for an unspecified conditional use, specifically for a transload facility for hazardous Class A low-level radioactive waste materials located at 1095 East Rusco Road. And the applicant is Wisconsin and Southern Railroad LLC and Watco Companies. I'm going to turn this over to our city attorney, Ian Press, to kick off this topic.
I'm going to have Jim do the intro and then I'll go over the stuff.
We'll send it to Jim. Thanks.
Sure.
Thank you. So Watco Companies LLC has submitted a application for a conditional use permit for a transload facility located at 1095 Rusco Drive for the shipment of hazardous and Class A low-level radioactive waste materials. The property is zoned M2 heavy industrial. As a part of our zoning code, the code addresses an area for unspecified or unclassified uses that the Plan Commission could permit, provided that they're similar in nature in principle, for principal uses or conditional uses under that specific zoning district. Our code does not specifically address transloading areas or areas that handle hazardous materials for facilities. The closest use that we could relate to this under the M2 would be a recycling or a waste collection center. And that is only permitted as a conditional use under the M2 industrial zoning. So since the transloading facility for the hazardous and low-level radioactive waste is not specified or classified, the commission would have to make a determination to the use, which would be similar to something like this, which in staff's opinion would be the conditional use for a waste management or waste collection or a recycling facility, and thus would require a conditional use permit in order for that activity to occur in the M2 district. An operations letter was, along with a presentation, was sent as a part of the packet for the conditional use. The activities would include a duration of 7 years for this project to happen. They're anticipating approximately just under 7,000 containers to be loaded on the site during the duration of the project. The hours of operations would be Monday through Thursdays, 6 a.m. to 4 p.m. for the semi-truck loading and unloading for the deliveries, and the rail car shipments would be collected on Wednesdays and Saturdays from the site. The deliveries would be limited to 3 trucks at a time for 2 trips a day, so a total of 6 containers being delivered and picked up. A total of 12 containers would be loaded on the rail cars and waiting for pickup on the site. The specialized container vehicle would be used there. They call it a reach stacker, would be stored on site, and this would be used to load and unload the containers on and off the semi-trucks and on and off the rail cars. The materials to be shipped would consist of concrete, structural metals, and system equipment there from the site that is being removed from, and then also waste materials for, which consist of protective clothing, materials that would come in contact from the demolition, and then also site tools that would be used on that site for demolition. The site itself is a paved area which has a water lateral stub extending into the site. The driveway entrance is currently gated off and locked, restricting vehicle access. If the conditional use permit would be granted by the Plans Commission, staff would recommend that that water lateral be extended into the site and a fire hydrant be provided on site in case there would be a need for fire protection to be used on that site. Staff also would recommend that since the site is going to be unmanned the majority of the time, that some kind of a security measures be placed to monitor the site when staff is not present on the site. All property owners within 200 feet were notified of the public hearing. Staff did not receive any comments or concerns pertaining to the conditional use notification from the property owners within that area. If the commission does find the use to be similar to the conditional use as identified in the M2 for the recycling centers and the solid waste facilities, staff would recommend that specific conditions be placed on the, as part of the conditional use as listed in the staff memo.
So because this one's a little bit different than most conditional uses, I just wanted to go over the two procedural issues. First one would be the finding, as was noted, that this is a similar use. Again, because this is an unspecified use, it's going to fall under a similar use. In this case, the closest, as Jim noted, is the waste collection and recycling center in the M2 district. Because that's only allowed as a conditional use, the finding would be that that's the similar use, and a conditional use permit would be required since that is what's required of that similar use. The second then, after that threshold is met, would be the terms and conditions of the conditional use permit. And as noted, the staff suggestion ones are all based on, essentially scientific or, provable conditions that are necessary for the site. Traffic regulations based on the proposed use, or traffic regulations or traffic study that would be required had the proposed use been in excess of the 10 cars, stormwater, other factors associated with the proposed use. So that would be the secondary consideration, assuming the first is met. So.
Justice.
Can somebody define low-level radioactive waste?
So it's what Jim had noted. It's going to be, debris, metal, et cetera, that is not directly, that it has there's regulations as far as how much radioactivity can be in the waste. So it's going to be debris and construction materials from the site.
Okay, I guess what I'm asking is this a dangerous level of radioactive material?
I think that's unfortunately with radioactivity, it's a more relative question because it's so related to exposure times, levels of exposure. I'm sure if you sat in the container for long periods of time, it could be dangerous at low levels, but it's been deemed by the federal government to be transportable over the roads and rails. So
okay.
There is that. This is not the fuel materials being transported or something like that.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
Just a follow-up to that, I didn't see in the plan anything. What if there was a leak on site? Do they have a plan or procedures for that? I didn't see anything in that.
Yeah, we did pose that question, but they didn't have any information provided for that.
I think that's where largely the stormwater management and such comes in because it is solid materials. It's the biggest concern there is runoff in the rainstorm like we had today.
So I have a couple of comments on that. So the stormwater management ordinance does not regulate the use of the property or even containment of potential leaks or anything like that. Stormwater management basically regulates anything that would impact the amount of runoff. So any change to the land cover with more impervious areas and things like that, or change in grading, changing drainage patterns and everything like that. So at this time, we talked to the applicant and they told us that they're doing no change to the site, so there would not be a requirement for a stormwater management permit, contrary to what the memo says. I was reading up, I think it's 21620 in the DNR rules, and anything with potential containment requirement would come from the DNR, so they would have a special permit from the DNR. But if that permit requires changes to the site, like you have to put a tank in the ground or you have to dig a basin somewhere to collect potential liquids from the leak, etc., then at that point that would trigger our requirement for a stormwater management permit. So they would have to find out from the DNR what requirements would be for that, for their potential leaks.
If I may, when we wrote that, the intent was not to require a change in the stormwater management, but to basically represent if the Plan Commission felt containment was an issue in case of a spill, that the changes in grade would necessitate a change in the stormwater management plan for the site. Something as simple as a gas station, we do conditional uses that include spill containment for surface spills. You don't even see them. You drive over them without even knowing. But they do act as a temporary measure for containment and keeping it located for a spill. This isn't necessarily analogous to that, but I agree with Max that if the DNR requirements for an industrial site with this type of use require containment, then we would be looking for that as a condition of this permit.
I guess similar to the runoff from a storm like today, with the recommendation to put a hydrant in the property. If something were to happen, should we require containment of water used in suppression of any type of fire? Because whether it's rain or coming out of a hose, if it's contaminated, we don't want that running into our retention facility, and then who knows from there.
And residential was notified, is there residential within 200 feet of this?
Yeah, there are a few homes on the north side of Rusco.
And nobody had concerns about low-level radioactive waste?
No one notified us or contacted us in regard to the notice.
Okay.
Are we the first municipality that they've reached out to? I'm a little surprised that they got to haul it this far, but maybe that's the nearest rail siding they have available to them.
From discussions that we had with them, we weren't the first ones. This area has some of the better loading areas and, for stacking their rail cars that they need. But they have looked at other areas, but this, in their opinion, was the best location for them to do the switch off, I guess you could say.
Ian, we have to have a public hearing on this tonight, and so my question is, if the Plan Commission deems that this does meet a conditional use, then are we then voting on the actual conditional use tonight?
Yep, so you'll open the public hearing, take any comment, and then consider any comments along with, any other issues that come up in discussion, and then you can approve it tonight.
Okay. Like I said, we have to have a public hearing on this tonight. We can certainly continue to ask questions, or we could open up the public hearing. Seeing no more questions up here for now, we will conduct a public hearing on this topic tonight. This is for a conditional use permit to allow for an unspecified conditional use, specifically for a transload facility for hazardous Class A low-level radioactive waste materials located at 1095 East Rusco Road. So if any anybody from the community would like to address the Plan Commission tonight, please step up to the microphone to be heard. I will move to close public hearing. Second by Jed. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Public hearing is now closed. Is there any more discussion on this topic? Jed?
I was just going to say that I'm less concerned about this than I was about the Barton solvent. Was that a conditional use when we had Barton solvents here, or was that just a site plan?
That was only a site plan,
Okay.
I believe.
In any event, because the zoning was okay for it, the Barton solvent I was more concerned about, and this is covered by Barton solvents is covered by state statute via the DNR, as well as our ordinances. This is covered by DNR as well as the federal government. And I think the low-level nature of the material is less threatening than what Barton solvents has got going in that same area. So,
Hey.
Yeah, I too, I'm not concerned. It could be, being that it is low-level, Class A, and they are fully compliant with OSHA and DOT and the NRC limits. It does sound like solid waste in a sealed container. I mean, and then they also said it's not going to touch the ground, so.
Yeah, I think the biggest concern is a dropped container and spills and such. That's obviously the biggest concern.
Jim, did they talk about if this passes, when they would like to start?
They wanted to start
Yesterday.
last month already, yeah.
Because isn't Rusco Drive still under construction for another few weeks at least?
Refer that
So
over to
the
Max.
the construction is supposed to end, I believe, July 21st. So I have a weekly progress meeting coming up with DOT tomorrow, and I'll know a little more. We may have been delayed a couple of days because there was a soft area we had to bridge with additional stone underneath. So it might be July 23rd, but it shouldn't be beyond that. Anyway, yeah, maybe another couple of weeks. Yeah.
Are they able to operate in this area if Rusco was still under construction?
No, I would say I would not want them to start operating until Rusco Drive is reopened once the construction is completed.
Jed?
Jim, the scenario that Ian just mentioned, that is, they drop a container and it busts open, okay? Now, we can revoke a conditional use permit, correct?
So it would be, yeah, I mean, if there's cause to revoke a conditional use, it's essentially, it's like any other, like a liquor license or anything like that, where we have to have a hearing to revoke it, essentially, because it's,
Right.
once granted, it's, a right under the zoning code. You can revoke it if they do not follow the plan. So if they start bringing in 40 loads a day and they're exceeding the limits under the conditional use, you can address that. And depending on certain other requirements, obviously you can move to revoke the conditional use if they're in non-compliance.
Well, that raises an interesting scenario then. They're in compliance with everything, but nevertheless, something goes wrong and they drop one. And I'm not saying it's going to be an environmental disaster,
Right.
but it's still concerning. But they've complied, so that means we could not revoke it?
Correct. We need to make sure the requirements, like Max described, the compliance with the NR 216.20 would be in place, and that any requirements from the DNR would be complied with for essentially spill containment as part of the stormwater plan.
Okay.
I do have a couple of general questions, and I'll circle back to the contamination. But first, with the number of trucks, so the memo indicates that it would be a maximum of 6 loads coming every day? Is this limitation because of the number of train cars they can have and the capacity of those cars? They can only get so many containers on them. Or I'm going there because I'm wondering, is there, I just wanted to make sure this is the maximum number of loads per day, or is it possible within the 7 years that this is happening that we would have periods where they bring more loads per day?
So we tried to address that by essentially, if the proposal had been for more than 10 loads per day, we would have required some type of impact analysis. Less than 10 loads, which is, they're proposing 6 a day, but less than 10 loads is not, given the other traffic that's out there, is not going to be excessive. That's not going to trigger problems. And so we capped it at, in the recommendations, it's capped at no more than 10 loads per day. Again, because we would have required further evidence of the impact.
So there could be days where they would have more than the 6 loads.
Correct. So they could have up to 10. So if some malfunction or something prevented them from making deliveries today, they would be able to bring 10 loads to catch up. Similarly, we didn't explicitly say like you can only have the train loads these days, or the goal is the train cars coming on specific days, but we all know there's delays in the process. And so yes, if the train cars are delayed by a day or two, they can shift their hours accordingly to make sure that materials aren't sitting on the railroad tracks for an excessive period of time.
Okay, thank you. And then so we were talking about contamination with if the container drops and breaks, now the contents might spill on the site, and we're concerned about that contamination. And reading through their letters, their document, they have a very specific way of doing things where they're going to pick up the container from the truck and then put it on the train car, and it will never touch the ground. But do we know how they operate from the site where they're picking up the material? Where are those containers sitting? Are they sitting on the ground? Is it contaminated ground? Will we have contaminated ground on the side of the containers being on the train car for a few days, rained on, and then that material ends up on the site for 7 years, and then we end up with contaminated ground on the site, even though it didn't come from inside the container? Do we have any grasp on that operation and any potential ramifications for the city of West Bend with this contamination? Can we ask those questions to the applicant?
I think you can.
Yeah, we should be able to. I don't know if the applicant is here. We sent them notice and everything. Oh, okay. Yeah, it'd be best addressed if you could address that, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So when the cans are loaded on site and they're loaded onto a truck, they are tested before they actually leave the site. They're wiped down by the team there. When they actually get to the site where we'll be doing the transloading, we'll take them from the truck chassis, load them onto the rail car, and then the container is actually wiped again when it's at the site, and also the truck chassis is wiped again at the site, also checking for radioactive materials. So there's our customer has a lot invested in this. They do a great job, and they go the extra steps to ensure that there's no waste getting dropped on the ground, that it's a safe operation.
When you say wipe, do you mean they take a towel and wipe it, or do you
No.
they
So they
take a
do
detector
test swabs to check. So they have a team on site. They would have a team at the West Bend location that would actually test the containers for radioactive material on the truck chassis as well. They do swabs.
Thank you.
You're welcome. On the emergency response, if a container was to break or spill, there is an emergency response plan in place, and a vendor would be contacted at that time to come on site or wherever the incident occurs to deal with that incident.
Where's that vendor operating from?
So the vendor is Patriot Environmental, and I think they have vendors all throughout Wisconsin. And I know there's a couple different locations. I believe they have a location in Milwaukee as well.
Okay, so we're not talking half a day to get
We're
here.
not talking, yeah, no. We're
Okay.
talking rapid response.
Jed?
I'm glad you're here, because I had asked staff a question which they couldn't answer, so I'll pose it to you. To get a handle on the radioactivity, the people who are working on site here, do they have to wear radioactive protective gear?
No, sir.
Okay. So that means that there's no exposure. I mean, if they're working right next to these containers, and they don't have to wear a suit. So
Correct.
yeah, okay.
Do they have to wear a badge, like an exposure badge?
No, sir, not our team, no.
So I have one more question.
Oh, that's all right.
And on the go ahead, I'm sorry.
So since they're wiping their equipment, they're wiping their trucks and everything, is there some type of, if this permit is granted, should the city enter into some agreement with the user that they do like a swipe or wipe of our site, or it's not our site, but the site itself, maybe on a yearly basis, and plus so many years after you're done using it, because this program would be 7 years. So should we do a yearly swipe, like the following 5 years, the following 10 years, to make sure that we're still below and I don't know a lot about radioactivity and everything, and how really useful that would be, but that would be a concern to make sure that nothing is left behind for the city of West Bend.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So a survey's already been done on the site. So they came out there, our customer came out and did a survey of the entire site and also along downside the tracks. And the intent is, once this operation is over, they will then come back out and do another survey to compare where they were to when they started to when the project was finished, to make sure that there is no contamination left over.
Okay, and it's not the type of contamination that would take time before it's detected. Like if it's there, you're gonna see it right away. It's not gonna just stay there dormant and then pop up 2 years later, correct?
Yeah, you'll see it right away. I mean,
Okay.
the debris that's being shipped was a great job explained by Jim. It's building materials, concrete structures, stuff like that.
Okay, thank you.
And they're in DOT sealed containers, chained on, with multiple chains on the end, very difficult to access. When they're actually loaded onto the rail car, the door that opens is loaded in towards the rail car, and then another container is placed against it, so you can't even access these doors. So that's another part of that security that you guys were talking about earlier. To actually get into these containers is, it makes it extremely, extremely difficult, the way they're placed on the rail cars.
Does the city have a facility to basically audit the audit? Do such a swipe of the property at the beginning and at the end? Not to say there's any shenanigans going on, but if they're reporting on themselves, I'd be interested in doing our own audit just to validate.
I don't think we have that on staff, but we could certainly.
Do we have a contracted partner that's-
contract out for such a survey? I mean, it may not be as comprehensive with like sampling or anything like that, but you could certainly have somebody sweep the site with, essentially the radioactive version of a metal detector. May not get you as accurate a readings as you would if you were taking samples specifically for that purpose, but it at least can verify the presence or absence of radioactivity to know if further testing would be needed.
Sure. And you guys don't do core samples or anything like that. You're doing a sweep in the air and so forth as well, correct?
I can't speak to that completely. I'm not aware of, how in-depth that goes. Our customer did that on themselves, so.
Mayor?
Thank you.
I don't want to, I am going to belabor it, I'm sorry, but for Ian, back to my question about the conditional use permit. So when we vote on this, condition 1 is all business operations shall be in accordance to the business operations narrative letter and the waste management program presentation submitted by Watco and Energy Solutions. Well, both the project narrative and that presentation state container will not touch the ground. So would that mean that if a container did fall and break because it hit the ground, that be a violation of a condition?
I don't think that would rise to that could arise to some type of warning letter if it was that. And obviously, as noted, there's a spill response in place. The specific concerns with that are twofold. One is that containers start getting stored on the site for a regular basis. Obviously, there could be extenuating circumstances that would prevent it. But just like with any permit, there's degrees of enforcement and need for enforcement. Extenuating circumstances are, something that can be taken into consideration as part of the enforcement. Concern is they start storing containers on the site on a regular basis, and now we have different concerns as far as security, et cetera. And the other specific concern there is that the nature of the waste changes from the class 1 low level to some other type of waste being transported through through the site, and now we may want additional requirements because there's a more acute danger from the materials being transported.
Okay. Sir, you didn't say who you work for. Could you clarify that?
My name is Clint Woods. I work with Watco.
And Watco is one of the railroads?
Yes, the Wisconsin Southern, yes.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
You had a chance to review the proposed conditions?
I did.
Were there any specific concerns with the proposed conditions?
So I think one was addressed was the stormwater plan. I
Yep.
think that one was addressed, and I think, I know the gentleman had mentioned about DNR. We've run these avenues as well, and we'll continue to run them also. We've been in talks with the city on this, our environmental team has. So we'll continue to do that and make sure we have whatever we need that's in place.
Okay, but the rest of them, there was no complaints about the rest of the requirements?
Not at this time.
Okay.
If I were to add a condition that operations don't start until the construction on Rusco Drive is completed, which will be in probably 3 weeks, is that okay as well?
If that's a condition you put on it.
And Max, that's just kind of going off of your recommendation, that's a,
Yes, that would be fine. Thank you.
any more discussion? I will make a motion to approve the conditional use permit 23-005 to allow for an unspecified conditional use specifically for a transload facility for hazardous Class A low-level radioactive waste materials located at 1095 East Rusco Drive with the conditions the staff recommended, in addition to the condition that operations don't start until Rusco Drive construction is complete.
Second.
So one just point of clarification based on the discussion. The stormwater management plan amendment would incorporate any changes required by the DNR as part of their, as part of the spill management or industrial waste or industrial stormwater discharge permits.
Yes, any change that they would make to the site, whether it came from a DNR requirement, or otherwise, if I don't know if they change their use and they decide, well, we need to modify the site land cover or drainage pattern or anything like that, they would need to get a stormwater management permit from us.
I just wanted to clarify that that's included in the motion.
Okay, thank you.
Any more discussion? There's a motion on the floor. Thank you for the second, Justice. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Motion carries. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, and thank you for your time.
Our next item of business tonight is a conditional use permit, 23-004, and this is continued discussion from our last Plan Commission meeting for the consideration of a conditional use permit to allow a mobile food vendor in the B1 Community Business District located at 801 West Washington Street, and the applicant is Jeremy Hahn. Jim, you want to kick that one off too?
Sure.
Great.
Just give me 1 minute and I'll give the commission a brief on that. So back at our June meeting, the Plan Commission reviewed a request for a mobile food vendor at 801 West Washington. The commission requested that the applicant consider revising his request to address some of the concerns that the Plan Commission had along with the neighborhood. So Mr. Hahn has resubmitted the conditional use application. He has modified the request to a single food truck. The food vendor would be for a concessions type food vending, offering funnel cakes and cotton candy, snow cones and whatnot. The sales area has been modified for that. He's actually requesting that the food truck be parked up on the sidewalk area, just at the southeast corner of the building. You can see the location that he's identifying there. The area should be wide enough for the truck to park on there, giving the potential people or customers the ease of access through the sidewalk areas for that. So the truck itself would not be located within the parking lot at all. It would be located next to the building. The hours of operation were actually clarified by the applicant. He would still request that it would be from 10 in the morning until 8 p.m. at night, which has been reduced from 10 in the morning until 10 at night. And it would still be Sunday through Saturday, so up to 7 days a week for that. The restroom facilities would be open at the time that the food truck is open, along with the business being open. And the sales activity would occur at the food truck, and the food truck would be responsible for the cleanup and daily disposals of the refuse. The owners, originally we notified owners of property within 200 feet. The Plan Commission asked us to re-notify them about the meeting for tonight. Staff has. We have still received several phone calls from the neighborhood within the 200 feet and beyond the 200 feet. Essentially still expressing some of the same concerns pertaining to the traffic, the days of the week, hours of operation, the noise, and then also the concern of the food truck turning into a principal use. Under our code, the food truck wouldn't be able to operate as a principal use since it has to be accessory to the actual property as a non-principal use for the food vending. If the Plan Commission would find the conditional use to be acceptable, staff did list 7 conditions in accordance to the for the restrictions on the conditional use.
Jed?
Go ahead and discuss it.
Sure.
I think this is good. These are logical changes that were made. Putting it next to the building gets it out of the way, further away from the single-family homes. I think that these are reasonable changes that were made. There's one suggestion I have is that condition number 7, instead of saying no music may be played in connection, no sound amplification equipment may be used in connection. Just to clarify that, but I can't see, I mean, a concern was voiced about safety of children. I don't understand that. Children, I don't understand that at all. I don't see a noise issue anymore. There was one concern about traffic going the wrong way. Well, we don't limit an operation of any kind because somebody is too stupid to understand a one-way street, frankly, okay? I mean, Mark can clarify this if he wants, or if necessary, if I'm misinterpreting this, but my understanding is a rejection of a conditional use permit has to be based on a reasonable basis. And so we have to have a reasonable threshold to reject, and it can't be on a theory that a car is going to go the wrong way on a street. If it becomes the principal use, well, that's a violation of the conditional use permit. But we can't presuppose that now and say, I mean, it's a condition, so it has to be, Mr. Hahn knows that it can't be a principal use. So compared to the concerns that we had last time, I just don't have those anymore. Thanks.
Paul?
I appreciate the adjustment in the hours, pulling it back to 8 p.m. And as Jed said, also the reduction by half in the food truck count. I will share that on Father's Day, my family and I went down to the tap yard down at Ackerman Grove. There were 5 food vendors down there, and we were probably, the closest was about 40 feet away from us, and at no point did I feel that I needed to elevate my voice to talk over the noise of the generators. Generators these days are pretty quiet, and if you've got a new truck, it's probably got a new generator on it. If it's mounted on the front, it's pointing away from the residences on 9th Street, so I like that. I would like to suggest that if we proceed with approval, can we put it out there on a 90-day review? You're mid-July now by the time you get started. I would say you've probably got 6 weeks, and then once school starts, peak season is starting to run down, but do we give them 3 months, kind of revisit how things are going and, make any adjustments necessary and so forth?
I don't have the answer to that question, if that's a normal procedure to do a 90-day conditional followed by a review, or?
The issuance of a review period does have precedence. We have done it. We've done annuals. Again, it depends on the type of use you're talking about here. But yeah, I wouldn't think that a review period would be out of line for it. The question is, do you want to wait to the end of the season, or do you want to wait for a specific time period? It's really up to the Plan Commission's call.
Okay. Justice?
Yeah, I just want to express a lot. But I mean, these guys pretty much stole all my material here, but I like the changes that Mr. Hahn has made, and like you said last time, Jed, I'm also a Jeremy Hahn fan. He's done a lot of good things with downtown, and even discussed on coming up into Barton and doing some stuff up there. And I personally would like to give him an opportunity to do this. I think the review period's a reasonable period of time. If it was 3 months or 6 months or whatever, I think it makes sense to revisit and just make sure everything's working okay. And if any changes need to be made at that time, maybe there's some unforeseen circumstances in that particular location that we're not thinking about right now, But other than that, I'm with it.
Just a question around, I think it's read this way, but it's the same truck used every day. It's not a different vendor. It's the same one every day.
It might be a different one.
Okay.
We have one truck right now, one place that could change.
My question is, how do you determine the principal use. So I believe there's a church that meets in there on Sundays, so they're, I assume, meeting there once a week. It's the only use of the building, I believe, at this point. So is that the principal use of the building? Or is it the fact that the church is there from, say, 8 to noon, 4 hours during the week, during a 7-day week, and then this food truck is there for 30 hours? Is that then the principal use, is the truck? So how is that determined?
Yes.
Yes.
Principal use is generally determined as a combination of both the extent or aerial extent of use on a site, as well as the duration or time the use occurs on the site. So if you have a large building, which he does on this site, it was intended to be the principal use of that site. That's what the parking lot is designed for, and all the rest. He would, and I would hate to see him lose the ability to use that building for whatever reason on the thing. The conditional use, whether it's in this as a condition of this or not, it's in our code expressly is that it cannot be the principal use. So if the building was empty, it's the only use occurring on the site, it would be de facto a principal use. If the building is used and it's the largest use on the site, you can judge it to be the principal use. So if he's got tenants in there, he has a principal use within the building and on the site. As to the time, I don't know what you'd have to ask the applicant as to what's in there and when it will be.
Well, and there again, with the review period at 90 days, I know you've talked about retail operations coming in under NDA and so forth, but 3 months out, we're a lot closer, if not already up and running. So I think that's a reasonable point for us to also take a look at. So what is the principal use of this, and are we in compliance?
Can I make a motion to approve?
Sure.
Did you make a motion?
Yeah.
With my change on that one condition? Okay, and I'll second it.
So there's a motion to approve by Justice, second by Jed. Jed, remind me what that additional condition was.
No sound amplification equipment instead of no music. So it would be no sound amplification system may be used in connection with the mobile food vendor's use.
So you mean like a microphone or something like that?
Well, I think that would cover the gamut of, what's that song that the ice cream trucks play? I'm not saying Jeremy's going to do that, but, just so it's clear that there shouldn't be any, noise. And, so is that okay? All right.
That's fine.
And I just wanted to say, if I may, we got hammered on Facebook, and people were yelling at us on Facebook that how unfair we were here at the commission, and, well, it's at Fleet Farm and it's at Menards, and so what's the difference? Well, the difference is this isn't zoned like Menards or Fleet Farm. This is a community business district, and there are no single-family homes near Menards and Fleet Farm. And this commission takes seriously impacts on neighborhoods, and that is why we didn't deny it. We asked Jeremy to come back with a new plan, and that's what happened. And this is how the system works, and I just wanted to clarify that.
And get off Facebook.
And that being said, there's an ordinance that says that this food truck has to be removed off-site each day, and this commission doesn't have the power to change that ordinance. And correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, but that ordinance is in effect for this food truck, even though he owns the parking lot and the property that it is going to be used on.
That is correct. That is a code requirement that was considered and recommended by this plan commission and adopted by the Common Council. So, no, you do not have the authority to change that requirement.
Any other discussion?
So Mayor, what's the process then with my suggested additional condition of a review? Can I tack that onto this, or does that get handled separately, or?
Mark, do you want to address that?
I would suggest adding it as a condition of the approval.
Okay.
Okay, I'll add that. Yeah,
90 days?
90 days sounds
Is
good, yeah.
90 days reasonable, Jeremy, to? Okay.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Our next item of business tonight is a certified survey map 23-010. It's a certified survey map to combine 3 lots into one located at 701 South University Drive, and the applicant is Ryan Doherty.
Thank you. This certified survey map is located on University Drive, approximately 750 feet north of West Rusco Road. The purpose of this CSM is to combine several properties that have been acquired and combine them into one property for the future building site of a new home. The 10.3 acre parcel is zoned RS1, single family residential. The access to the lot will be from University Drive. The CSM provides adequate right-of-way for University Drive. Sanitary sewer does not exist in this area, so as an alternative for sanitary facilities on this lot, an on-site septic system would need to be provided to serve this property for sanitary facilities. A water main is directly adjacent to the property on the north within an easement that the city has, and water service would be obtained from that water line. A lot-specific grading plan would be required as part of this due to the unique site constraints and the building-specific area that will need to be placed in conjunction with the on-site absorption system that they have. This would need to be completed prior to the issuance of a building permit. Since the CSM is creating a new lot, a stormwater plan would be required in accordance with our stormwater requirements. Technical corrections are needed on the CSM prior to recording, and staff would recommend approval of the CSM with the listed conditions.
Any discussion on this?
Move to approve.
Thank you, Jed.
Second?
Second by Justice. Any comments, questions, discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Our last item of business is the extraterritorial certified survey map 23-009, which is an extraterritorial certified survey map to combine 2 lots into one, located at the northeast corner of Silver Lake Drive and Quaas Drive in the town of West Bend. The applicant is David and Beth Borst, and the agent is Hillcrest Builders.
So this certified survey map is an extraterritorial one. It's located approximately a quarter mile west of the city's corporate limits, just northeast of Silver Lake Drive and Quaas Drive. The purpose of the CSM is to combine 2 existing parcels into one for the construction of a new home on that lot. The CSM is within the city sanitary sewer service area, and it is also served by the Silver Lake Sanitary District. The CSM is consistent with the 2020 comprehensive plan for the city of West Bend. The CSM identifies adequate right-of-way for Silver Lake Drive and is dedicating a portion of it to provide the half right-of-way for that street. This is consistent with the city's official map. The CSM is within the county's shoreline jurisdiction and will need to be noted on the CSM along with some minor other technical corrections for the CSM prior to being recorded. Staff would recommend approval of it with the condition that the technical corrections be made.
I will go ahead.
Motion to approve?
Thank you, Justice. Is there a second? We'll give that to Jeff Schlamer. Motion and a second. Any comments, questions? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Before we adjourn, our next Plan Commission meeting is in August, correct? There was talk of a possible meeting in a couple of weeks that is not going to happen, and so we will see you in August. I'm unsure of the exact date, but just so everyone is aware. Thank you all for being here, and we stand adjourned.
So our next planning commission meeting is as normal? Yes. Okay, okay.